visit from Shaw Group CEO, and rather naively, given the rapidly changing scene in the world of telecoms, and with the end of their exclusive license being in view, it's a little way away yet, but it is in view, I thought that he would have arrived with something exciting and innovative in the way of ideas about the future of our telecoms, but I detected nothing on that front, and to say that I finished that meeting somewhat annoyed and highly disappointed would be the understatement of the year. I'm not sure whether the company has any intention of changing to embrace or compete with the price and packages offered by a company with bits of kit that are flying over the Falklands as I speak. I'm disappointed and nonplussed, as I presume that the company sees its future in the Falklands and yet seems to be putting profit before customers' desires and satisfaction and hiding behind its exclusivity license. This setup will come to an end, and if I'm on this assembly when that happens, there will be a change.
The world of telecommunications is a rapidly changing environment, with faster speeds, more reliable connections, and increases in security developing year on year. It is estimated that out of nearly 8 billion people in the world, more than 5 billion have access to the internet. Here in the Falkland Islands, numbers are obviously significantly smaller. The current population of the islands is around 3,800, 2,000 of which are using internet and communication services. Communication services play an integral part in our everyday lives, and it is hard to imagine our lives without them, especially here in a remote place such as the Falklands, where we rely on them to communicate across long distances.
In April 2017, the Falkland Islands government signed a 12-year exclusive licence with Shaw South Atlantic Limited, which is part of the Shaw Group. The licence is set to come to an end in 2027. The 2016 policy, of which the current guidelines and licensing procedures are based upon, recognises that the communication needs of the Falklands are best served through an exclusive licence to ensure that obligations to the entire population in Camp and in Stanley can be met.
Back in 2016-17, before I was an MLA, the contract was let for Shaw, and it's a universal service contract, so they have to provide the services to people in camp, people all around the islands. Doesn't matter whether or not you're a small user or a large user, they have a universal service obligation. In return for that universal service obligation, they had an exclusive contract with certain exclusions.
Now internet access, for example, is a service that it's almost an essential service. Similar to water or power. We all access things online as part of our daily lives. So it's not surprising then that people want the best possible service there.
The internet has, in the past 10 years, but even more so in the past sort of 5 or 6 years, it's become essential to our lives, hasn't it? It's a utility now. It's not really an option in most circumstances, and that's business, personal, and any other use. And so I can understand completely the vested interest that people have in how the Falkland Islands is going to keep up with the rest of the world on a service that is so essential.
Launched in 2019, 2 years after the exclusive Telecoms licence was issued by FIG to Shaw, the Starlink system was launched by Elon Musk's SpaceX, with users beginning to operate the system in 2020 with enthusiastic responses.
Currently, SpaceX has launched 5,600 satellites, with thousands more being planned to launch into the Earth's orbit. With its ability to be portable, lightweight, and theoretically be able to deliver high-speed connections anywhere on the planet, many here have been vocal in their opinion that Starlink may be the answer to the communication issues that the islands face. However, gaining the ability to operate a Starlink isn't an easy process, and there are doubts that it is the game changer it has been perceived as.
Yeah, I think it's been through the assembly several times, but my understanding is that part of the exclusive license was there's a sort of almost a penalty fee and included if you want to opt for Starlink to deter people from just choosing it. I think we need to have a really honest conversation with the public about why that is and what that is, and if that goes away or is reduced to nothing, what effect does that have on everything else?
So the exclusive license granted to Shure gives them exclusivity in provision of certain services. It also contains obligations on their part, both in relation to quality of service, price restrictions, and also universal service. So they're required to provide services. And obviously some of those services by themselves aren't economic for a commercial organisation to provide. So there has to be some cross-subsidy between the different services that the business offers and is required to offer. I think there are concerns that if you mess too much with the regime that's in place, you could put in jeopardy that cross-subsidy, which then is going to potentially have an impact on the services that are available to everyone.
I mean, there's a number of complex elements there. First of all, within our exclusive license, we are the only licensed operator here at the moment, so Starlink aren't actually licensed to operate in the Falklands, although clearly the regulator can award a VSAT license to individuals. Clearly, the company made significant financial investment in infrastructure on the basis of getting that license. So things that erode that, clearly that presents a challenge to us. The challenge here is the very small customer base. If the customer base actually reduces, then clearly the costs don't necessarily reduce with that. So there is a potential, yes, that it would put pricing pressure on the remaining customers, or other services become more expensive.
We've received a number of applications. One has led to a license being granted. There are, I think, about 3 others where we've sort of formally offered to grant licenses, and then 1 or 2 have withdrawn from that, and then there are 1 or 2 still awaiting determination. Obviously, we're starting to get applications now, sort of probably more regularly than previously.
I think one of the reasons people are interested is partly because it's new, and partly because they see the effect it's able to have in other parts of the world. And so it's something that a lot of people will want to try, and they'll want to see if it works here. They'll want to be able to demonstrate that it does work. And that is part as well of how we want to look at the future, is to say, when we go back out to market, rather than specifying a technology which is almost certain to become obsolete within a couple of years of signing any new contract, you look at the outputs you want. You want the Falklands to always have access to the best and most modern technology. You want that flexibility and option to be there for people to be able to make their own choices. That has to be balanced against the available market. Who's actually willing to come down here and serve this community in that way? And so that balancing act is going to be a key part of how we tender. And the flexibility that I would like to build into the scope is to go out to market and say to people, we want the best possible services. How would you provide that for us?
Ideally, we would have been way ahead of this, but it's such a complex and difficult subject that trying to understand what was happening with the Starlink licenses in the first place, and when they'd be awarded, and what effect is happening, who would get it, under what conditions. I think part of the license is that to qualify for an alternative service, like say it could be from any low Earth orbit provider, you have to prove that you can't get that service from shore. So there are checks and balances within it, but I think we have to move very fast on this. We can't just sit there and not do anything and expect to the Falklands to flourish and to innovate and adapt with the times. I think if we don't get ahead of this, then we're going to be constantly reacting and stifling development, I think.
There is a way of being able to utilise Starlink, and 4 people actually applied and I think were successful in being able to be offered the opportunity to take up a contract. They have to pay a licence fee, £5,400. It was set at that level to discourage people from self-provision, and whether if we put it down, that also impinges upon the exclusive contract and the agreement that FIG entered into all those years ago. So prior to being an MLA, I campaigned very strongly for satellite dishes, etc., to be left out of the contract and for people to be able to self-provide without that restraint. Unfortunately, that's not the way the contract was set up, but I think competition is healthy. I think a level of competition is healthy. I don't see why Shaw, with a large dish providing to lots of different people, shouldn't be able to compete successfully with things like Starlink. But I think, looking forwards, in any new contract, I would like to make sure that we, to the maximum extent possible, leave open the opportunity for people to take advantage of technologies such as Starlink.
If they leave the Shaw, stop paying Shaw and they go on their own way, is there the risk that the average consumer could see their...
Yes, there is. Their bills, either their bills will go up, or actually people like Shaw will just say we will withdraw from providing a service. So there is that, and we need to balance those two things in how we set up any new contract. I think you'd have to check with the AG, but certainly I think part of his consideration is the form that is filled in by the people and he ticks, and part of it is I think that they will continue to use their existing Shaw package. So that's not not unusual to be included in the application.
But there was previously an exclusive license under previous arrangements with Shaw, and when time came to look to review that, there were some sort of consultations with the community at the time, and there were some sort of external expertise where they looked at the sort of technological landscape as it was at the time, and they looked at what might likely happen in the coming years, and then having done that, having picked some things that obviously they felt were important, there was then a process of negotiation with Shaw. Now I think that was probably led by officials at the time, and including my predecessor and what was the Central Services Department at the time, and obviously that was then approved by members. Now the detailed consultants report was in 2015 that was considered, and actually it wasn't until 2017 that the new licence was signed and agreed. So I think there was a fairly extensive period of negotiation on that.
Most people will be aware that FIG's ability to flex within the current contract and licence is relatively limited, and that is a product of the contract that we're in. So from that perspective, engaging with the public is looking at the focus through the Technology Development Group. Now this is a sector-led group that has representatives as well as from the community, from business sectors, research, Rural Business Association, multiple others. Each sector has been invited to present on the issues that it finds, the ways it uses all telecoms, not just talking about the internet, but all different telecoms and the issues it faces. Shaw has been present at those conversations, as have several different members of FIG staff. And those have been consolidated both into a plan that's been relayed back to Shaw through a presentation again in the TDG, but also onwards towards the next licence period and how FIG is approaching that. So that first phase of what can we do within the current licence period is obviously something that is a very live issue, but our latitude is slim, which isn't to say that things aren't being tried. We've talked about what Shaw may be able to implement itself. The OneWeb system, which they are installing, we hope will be coming online soon, and when that does, there's potential to look at how that works and possibly for Shaw to expand that further, subject to commercial and other operational requirements. And we see OneWeb systems operating very effectively in the region. There's a bespoke OneWeb network been installed at Rothera for the British Antarctic Survey. It's a very different system in terms of the base station location and things to what we would have here, but it proves that the polar orbit satellites that OneWeb has access to do work. So from FIG's perspective, that's part of our contract with Shaw. We're going to look at that, and we'll look at other options as they may become available inside the Shaw contract.
The current VSAT licence fee is £5,400 as specified in the Communications Bill 2019, a cost that relates to the highest internet package that Shaw currently offer. The licence is only available under exceptional circumstances and requires the licence applicant to provide evidence to the regulator as to why the services being provided by the exclusive licence are not being met. Under the licence, the licensee is permitted to establish and maintain their own external circuits for sending and receiving messages. To operate a VSAT such as Starlink outside of the licence is an offence that could see you receiving a hefty fine. The licence also prohibits licensees from operating any form of public telecommunications service in the islands. Criticism has been levelled at the application process, with some who had applied for the VSAT licence stating that it had taken them 6 months to receive approval, significantly more time than the 28 days specified in the VSAT guidance notes.
Well, they should be dealt with a lot more swiftly than that. I think the issues here are around the impact on the exclusive licence, on what the terms and conditions are and should be for the grant of licences. There are some who disagree that these that a licence is needed for this particular purpose. And there has been some discussion with Shure as the exclusive licensee, not necessarily about individual applications, although there is one where we've done that, but particularly about the conditions for licensing, what is included within their exclusivity and what is outside of that exclusivity.
In 2015, a strategic telecommunications review was conducted by consultants Cartesian, Preschool & Co, with the goal of recommending licensing regulatory and technical options to the Falkland Islands government. The report assessed the telecommunications infrastructure and services provided by Shure, whilst also comparing them to services being offered in other markets.
Several examples from the report show that allowances in broadband packages were too low for customers, fixed broadband was seen as too expensive by the majority of internet users, mobile and WiMAX services were reaching the end of their lives, children were being socially impacted by the nighttime window, and there was low mobile coverage across camp. When considering these issues, the report did however recognise that Shure had built out a quality, well-developed network considering the characteristics of the market, and that Shure was deeply committed to serving the market, going beyond the call of duty, for example taking seriously the commitment to provide communication in camp. With this report being published 10 years ago, which issues have been addressed and which have not?
The way that the licence is structured, it means that we have every incentive and motivation to make sure that the services we provide get all of the correct investment and we keep improving services. That's what we are trying to do. We're all about trying to improve the services for the whole community so everyone can benefit with the new technologies that are being made available. And hopefully you can see that over the last few years. You know, since I was last here, data packages are up almost 2.5 times to 3.5 times. Speeds are up, as I said earlier on, by 40% just in the last 12 months. So things are constantly improving and that requires investment. We're spending millions of pounds at the moment upgrading that core infrastructure that has allowed us to increase speeds. And as I said, we talked about line lengths too. Into the camp, we've had a multi-million-pound investment to improve services there, which we're getting there. We're not quite where we wanted to be, but we've still got about half of the camp customers and camp locations to fully convert and upgrade. Once that's done, that will really help as well.
I think one of the things that's quite instructive is to look at the, even things like the internet connection. I think in 2014, when the consultants' report was prepared, the Falkland Islands connection to the internet was through a 68 megabit per second connection to serve everybody. And now we have, through the Earth station, more than a gigabit per second. So that's, a massive step change in that. We've seen recently, the extra dish at the Earth station. We've seen the installation of the OneWeb satellite. That increases some resilience. I know that Shure have refreshed quite a bit of their network infrastructure, and again, this is significant capital expenditure by the company, and that has to be recovered. So there has been some government subsidy put into that, and then obviously it's from charges from customers that the rest of it is funded. But the upfront costs have to be met by the company. And as I say, so they've improved that network infrastructure. They've improved the services. So mobile technology, I think they've moved obviously from a 2G mobile phone network into the 4G mobile phone network. So again, that investment has occurred during the period of the current license. And again, the mobile coverage has expanded to cover quite large parts of the islands. Now, I'm sure, inevitably there are areas that are not covered, and that I think is always going to be the case. But actually there is quite wide coverage across the Falkland Islands.
At the end of 2023, there was a 50% increase on top of data allowances for everyone's domestic packages, and that is being provided for largely through that second dish. It could just about be carried on the one dish that was available, but the second dish brings in a huge amount more. So FIG has been really encouraged to see that capital investment by Shure to provide that resilience. That second dish has additional capacity up and beyond that as well, which some local companies and FIG are able to use through bespoke packages. And particularly for businesses, that negotiation with Shure over your particular business needs is such a crucial one. If you're on a standard package and you're not satisfied, Shure are there to serve their customers by having those conversations. In terms of resilience of data, we do now have more capacity coming into the islands. It is still satellite data, it is still subject to the restrictions of that medium, but in terms of the overall resilience, it's higher than it was.
So what we've been doing is upgrading camp to effectively switch from what was an older technology, which is called WiMAX, which is a bit like Wi-Fi, but on a bigger scale, to 4G mobile technology, which is basically much faster broadband. And that we've had some technical issues to get that to work really, really well. We're hopeful that we're going to be able to fix that in the next few weeks, and then we'll complete the rollout later this year so that everyone's got better speeds.
They've been great strides, and FIG has worked with Shure as well. So it's not just Shure doing it on their own. In order to increase the packages to people, the government kicked in a subsidy of almost £1 million, and then we had another negotiation, and we put in another lot of money because it was we thought it was unreasonable at the time to expect Shure to take the risk of getting extra bandwidth on, without knowing that people would take it up. So we put some money in, and that's why we did that. We worked with the existing sole provider to see things move forwards, and I think we've continued to do that, and we continue to work with Shure. But looking forwards at a new contract, we maybe need to look at other ways in which we can stimulate any sole provider to be innovative in the way they provide services to the islands.
I think people often try and find comparisons, and obviously people do make comparisons. The most common one is what you pay for a service in the UK versus here, and the fact we get adverts on the telly in the middle of Coronation Street probably don't help me in that regard. But I think that there's two challenges. One is geographic remoteness, where we are in the world. And then the other one is the islands are actually very, very big once you get here. So there's other remote islands, but they tend to be quite physically small. So you don't have the same challenges. If you've got a mobile network, it's in a very small geographic area. We've got to do a mobile network in a huge geographic area. So, it's comparable to maybe parts of the outback of Australia in that regard. So it's always a challenge operating in a small community. I don't think it's unique to telecoms. I think other sectors experience that. I think a challenge for us is, economically, we've got to work within the customer base we've got here, which is 3,500 people. The team work very, very hard. We appreciate we can't offer what you get in the UK, but very much, there's a focus here about that sort of continuous improvement, trying to improve the service with increased reliability. And over time, there's been massive changes.
We're not a big market, are we? We're a village anywhere else. And actually, if you look at the provision of internet to villages in Wales, in Scotland, etc., that's pretty poor as well in many places. We're very mountainous in various areas. It's a difficult one for anybody to provide a service to. And we got mobile phone service. I know it's not perfect, but it's a pretty good mobile phone service given the number of people that we have in our islands. So I think all of those things need to be weighed up against the benefits of opening up the market completely. But technology is changing. Starlink are already saying they're going to have phones that you can reach straight up and to the internet, and you can go straight on to a satellite. So, think the technology is changing so fast. We need to make sure that we provide something that's fit for purpose for the next 10 years, 15 years, or whatever. And who knows how far technology will advance during that period.
As we've demonstrated over the last 5 years, having that collaborative arrangement with the government where there's also an element of subsidy has been much more beneficial for consumers than if Shaw and government are at loggerheads, because that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the company, and it doesn't help the government, and it most certainly doesn't help customers. So I think we've, since the licence was awarded, it was obviously there was a certain amount of comment and opinion during the licence award, but since then we have worked with FIG to demonstrate how we can improve services, but also how they can help offset some of those challenges, which they've done with the subsidy and the £1 million a year that they've put in, and that effectively has delivered a significant price reduction for customers. If that wasn't in place, what you'd have to pay for the service would be significantly higher, probably 40-45% higher than it is at the moment. So I think that relationship has worked, not of a scale where we could be a Starlink reseller, for example. So I have had a bit of a look at this. Starlink were approached when we done the last capacity upgrade, and they declined to even respond to our tender document. And I think to be a Starlink reseller, you've got to sell 1,000 terminals a year, every year.
I think you mentioned it being one of the last technology development.
Yeah, so maybe in the first year we would meet that obligation, but you lose that if you don't continually sell 1,000, because their business model is very much on scale. They've got a global population they're trying to serve. They're not interested in 10, 20, even 1,000 customers. They're looking at sort of millions of customers. So I think there's a challenge there, and it's just not a commercial offer that we can get, because if we can't legally resell something, then we can't, as a large company, we can't do that. So it's something I've looked at, but we just do not meet the economics of even their minimum sort of reseller agreement.
We are looking to improve things quite quickly, so we're currently in discussions with our suppliers. There's effectively up there a lot more capacity, probably 20 times more capacity than only a few years ago, and that's set to keep increasing. There's the likes of Starlink. There's also companies like OneWeb, who we actually have installed here and are about to launch as well. That are using low Earth orbit satellite constellations, which mean it's far lower latency, and potentially can help with things like people who play games or businesses who want to use cloud services. So we're going to be launching that soon, but also we can look to bring more capacity from the sky effectively, and we will start to evolve and add more and more speed and add more and more data to our packages, and you'll see that coming. There'll be some announcements in the next few months, and then we hope to take that and apply it in a positive way. So the more capacity we can buy, effectively, the lower the economics improve, and we hope to be able to pass that on in terms of an improved service to our customers here in the Falklands. And so then everyone gets to benefit as things improve, and we'll get momentum. And that's because the technologies that are available and the capacity that's available is improving all the time as well.
So I think the expectations are, constantly sort of increase. We see, new devices, we see new services, and yes, so sometimes the expectation there isn't able to be met by the reality. I mean, as I say, some of the expectations that are met by internet access elsewhere are met because there are large fibre cable connections that we don't have. I think when the current license was being discussed back in the sort of 2015, 2017 time, one of the consultants that they engaged at the time said that there was probably a 3 or 4 year lag between what things that were happening in, say, UK, Europe, US, and what could happen here. And I think it's interesting that that's what they thought at the time, and probably our expectations are that there shouldn't be any sort of lag. What we also sometimes, point of perspective we should think about is, you take the position of somewhere like the UK. Well, there isn't just one situation in the UK. If you live in a sparsely populated rural area, you will have very different provision or no provision of certain services than if you live in the middle of a major city. So again, I think we need to have that context in mind as well.
I mean, when you look at the changes that have happened in the last 20 years, I mean, they're massive. So within the last 20 years, it's certainly when I started working there, the major sort of revenue stream was international phone calls. So the internet hadn't really come in by then. I mean, it was there were dial-up connections that people were using, but it wasn't anything like we see now. And certainly voice over IP was in its infancy really at the time. So we've seen shifts and changes constantly. I think the appetite for internet, the consumption of internet. If you were to look back and see the exponential increase in not just the demand but also in the offering, but we've always been slightly behind the curve. That's the problem here. I mean, we are a small population in the middle of nowhere. I do think it is vital that we keep that sort of universal service obligation, or perhaps in place of that, ensure that the more isolated places can still access services. It may not be through the exact same model, but they have to be able to access services. I think it's easy to think about an individual in a large settlement who wants to pay a decent amount for very fast internet and still wants their mobile service and still wants other things that they get. But I think we also have to think about somebody, an individual, living in a very isolated, remote part who solely really wants a landline. How do you provide that if you whip away the infrastructure from behind it, and if you don't allow the revenue to be generated to replace that infrastructure, then either we as a government have to put the money in or understand that it will fall away. So how will those services be provided? So it is a really massive puzzle, and one that we're trying to understand far better. But I'm not going to pretend to you that we are ahead of the curve by any means yet. We're still considerably behind it, and I think trying to get somewhere near that is the key to what we do in the future.